The Virginia opossum, a magnificent mammal. Hello friends, I'm Eric Brendingham, otherwise known as Mr. B from Wildlife on the Move, and welcome to Let's Go Wild. Our creature feature for the day is magnificent mammals, and we've got a magnificent mammal right here in front of us. This is a Virginia opossum. No, it's not a Texas-sized rat. This is actually Lacey, and she is one of our animal ambassadors for Wildlife on the Move. And I really want to talk about some of her amazing characteristics, and you might even be hearing her right now. She is making a lot of noise with that nose, because that's one of her best senses. She's born with that right away, her sense of smell, because when a baby opossum is born, they are completely blind. They have only their two front legs. They're completely naked. They're even missing their back legs. So they're underdeveloped, because what makes this a magnificent mammal is she is the only marsupial in the United States. So she's not related to rats and mice at all. She's actually related to the kangaroo, wallaby, wombat, and koala of Australia, since they are all marsupials. Well, she is a marsupial as well. So I can get her up here so you can see her, and she can show you off that smelling characteristic right there. That's what she's doing with her nose. Now, what's really cool about this, since they rely on their nose, mom actually licks a little trail on her belly where that pouch is, a little slit of skin, and they go up inside of that pouch. Now, here's what you need to know. When a baby opossum is born, they are actually the size of a jelly bean. Very, very small. And as I said before, they're completely naked. They're blind in both eyes. They're missing their two back legs. They only have their front legs. So mom licks that little trail on her belly. She sniffs her way up inside of that pouch, and she goes in there and drinks milk for about 6 to 8 weeks. And that allows them to grow and get bigger, because they're preemies, basically. They're underdeveloped when they're first born. At about 4 to 6 weeks, they come out on mom's back and they hitch a ride around town like a backpack, and she carries them around. Now, what's really cool, if you want to try a party trick at home, do you know that a mom opossum can have actually up to 13 babies at a time? So you can even ask your family and friends this party trick. Do you know how many baby opossums can fit in a spoon? It's 13, because that's how many babies fit in her pouch as well. But it's pretty amazing that she would carry 13 babies on her back. That's a lot of work for a mom to carry that many babies around, but that's what they do. Now, the other characteristics of an opossum is the fact that they are the most toothiest mammal on land in the United States. She actually has more teeth than you and me, more teeth than a mountain lion, more teeth than a coyote, and more teeth than a bobcat. Matter of fact, we have 32 teeth. She actually has 50 teeth. And those teeth are all very, very sharp. And it's amazing. She has 26 on the top and 24 on the bottom. So with those 50 teeth, she actually can hiss and scare away her enemies. That's how she defends herself. She's not a real active biter, but I mean, if they were cornered, they definitely could use their teeth to bite. But more importantly, she uses them to hiss to scare off her enemies. She also uses those teeth to eat, obviously. And so she eats fruits, nuts, plants. Oh, nice yawn. You're showing off those teeth. Perfect timing there, Lacey. So she actually uses those teeth to eat fruits, nuts, berries, plants, snakes, eggs, lizards, mice, and insects. She's actually an everything eater. She's an omnivore. That's exactly right, like you and me. So she can eat just about anything. Now, one of her favorite foods of all is ticks. They actually love to eat ticks, which is a parasite that sucks blood and actually can cause disease. Now, we've been talking a lot about diseases and viruses these days, and we're getting over that, which is great. But this little animal can help us protect ourselves from a disease called Lyme disease, because she can actually eat 50,000 ticks in a year. That's a lot of ticks. And so that's an awesome, awesome thing that we have an animal that can help us with those kind of diseases. Now, the other thing that she can do is she can actually kill and eat venomous snakes as well. She is actually immune to the venom of all venomous snakes in her range. So that's an amazing characteristic as well. And scientists, since about 2015, have been studying these guys and figuring out how to synthesize their blood in order to make anti-venom for people. So that is also an amazing characteristic of an opossum, and something that's very valuable to us. So let me keep talking a little bit more about her as I put her here so she can explore a little bit more. And you can see her. I'm going to kind of move this log out of the way so we can see her a little better as she explores with you. Now, something besides those teeth, obviously back here I'm holding on to her tail, right? So she's got a prehensile tail. If you open and close your hand and say prehensile, that means gripper. So she can actually use that tail to hold on when she's climbing trees and keep herself from falling, because they are active tree climbers. Now, a lot of people think that opossums sleep hanging upside down, and that's not true at all. They actually sleep underground in burrows or actually in holes in trees, and that allows them to be safe. But her tail is strictly there to help her hold on to tree branches. Now, female opossums also have been seen carrying leaves and nesting material for their nest, or obviously their home where they sleep at night. And so that allows them to use that as a tool as well. And of course, babies will use that tail when they're holding on to mom like a backpack as they're hitching a ride around town. So that works out awesome. Now let's see some other things about the opossum. This animal also has something like you and me. If you can check it out right here, she actually has 2 thumbs on her back 2 feet. Now this animal is a little different. You might have been noticing some differences about her. She's missing an ear right here, and she is missing some of her back toes, but she does have the 2 thumbs. And so this is the only other land mammal besides you and me, people, that has opposable thumbs. So she can use those to actually hold on and keep herself from falling as well when she's climbing trees, and it's a good gripper for that. Now the reason she's missing her ear and some of her toes has to do with nature. Things happen. And unfortunately, one of the biggest predators of these animals is people. And so unfortunately, her mom was actually hit by a car. Pretty sad, and it does happen quite often. And when her mom was hit by the car, all the babies that she had were kind of vulnerable and in jeopardy because vultures actually attacked her family. And so that's why Lacey lost her ear. It got chewed off by a vulture, and she lost some of her toes. Now her brother, Dude, we also have as an animal ambassador with Wildlife on the Move, and he actually was the protector of the family. So he allowed everybody to pretty much survive. Well, most of them anyway. Some of the babies actually perished, unfortunately. But this animal was rehabilitated as well as Dude, and was actually given to us as an animal ambassador since she can't be returned to the wild because of those injuries. So that's some of the sad things that do happen in the world, but thankfully we have rehabilitators that can take care of these guys and help us and help wildlife survive and have a good life despite those hurdles and kind of experiences they have out in the wild. So that's one of the things. This animal is an animal ambassador for Wildlife on the Move, so you all can help do your part. We'll tell you more about that here in just a little while on how you can be a wild child for Wildlife on the Move. But this is awesome to talk about that opposable thumb. And then a few other quick things that this animal has that's really important is she is nocturnal. Even though she's up and active and doing a lot here today, she actually sleeps all day and she comes out at night. And so they actually sleep anywhere from 12 to 18 hours a day, which allows them to come out at night and search for food and find different places to hide and also live. So she is nocturnal, and she's kind of like the ultimate teenager since she sleeps 12 to 18 hours a day. But around 9, 10 o'clock at night, they come out and forage and look for their food that we've talked about earlier. Now, another thing these animals do, since sometimes they get stressed out or have some rough times like we've all been having, they have a way to alleviate that stress. She actually plays Monopoly, right? No. I know she plays basketball, right? No, my favorite, baseball. No, she doesn't play those things. She actually can play dead. So they don't even think about it. It's an uncontrolled response. They kind of pass out. They just go, pooh! Now, they don't make the poo noise. That's just me. That's the stuff that comes out of the backside we're not going to talk about today. But actually, she does make her body and her breath smell like poop and death. So it's kind of disgusting. So animals come up and sniff her and go, ooh, that's disgusting. I don't want to eat that. And they go one way, and then she'll wake up and go a different direction so that she can survive and thrive in her habitat. So that's an amazing, amazing characteristic of the opossum. Well, I think we talked about most of the things I know, but one thing I do want to share with you is don't be afraid of opossums. Now, I wouldn't recommend going up and touching them and holding them like I'm doing here. This takes training as well as understanding that this is an animal ambassador, but they do not carry any diseases. They don't have rabies, and they're really resilient to most diseases. But if you find an animal that's in distress or in need and you feel like it needs some help, remember there are rehabilitators out there and there are sources that can help you out. Now, one of the things that you need to know, though, is that it's best to leave them alone, because when a baby opossum is born, they actually, I'm sorry, not born, but when a baby opossum becomes an adult, they're actually 4 months of age. So even though they look small, they pretty much are on their own at 4 months of age. And so don't always have to intervene and help them. They're actually able to take care of themselves. But obviously, if you feel like there's a situation where an opossum needs some help, you can certainly contact local entities to help you. Well, I sure have enjoyed sharing with you a little bit more about the opossum, which is a magnificent mammal. But right now, we're going to have a word from some of our supporters, and we will be back soon with our Wild Side Chat. So stay tuned.
Let's Go Wild is brought to you by On Air Media, Happy Hawk Property Group, Mr. Longarm. Welcome back to Let's Go Wild, and now it's time for our Wild Side Chat, and I'm so excited to have our next guest. Let me introduce you to Kate Regroden from Bat World, and she's got some special guests. We're hoping they'll come out and see us today, but we'll play that by ear. But Kate, great to have you with us, and yeah, tell us more about Bat World and your mission and what y'all are all about and how people can help you out.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad to be here today. Bat World is the only sanctuary facility in the world that is dedicated specifically to rescue, rehabilitation, and lifetime care for orphaned, ill, and injured native and non-native bat species, and providing professional education for animal care experts in captive management of both fruit bats and insectivorous bats.
And that's fantastic because it's such a misunderstood species and very beneficial species, which we'll talk about. But so glad that you guys offer that service and are able to help people understand the best way to take care of these mammals that are magnificent, but so commonly misunderstood. So that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. So what sparked your interest in kind of getting involved with wildlife and specifically bats?
Got to go back a long way.
A long way, I know.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat because, you know, it goes back 28 plus years for me, so I'm sure you're in the same boat.
Actually, further.
Okay.
Further back than that. I am the youngest of 4 girls, and my father was a Boy Scout executive.
Awesome.
So I went to Boy Scout camp when I was a kid.
That's cool.
And started learning about wildlife. I've always been interested in animals and wildlife. Took an entirely different career path that had nothing to do with animals. I actually was working in information technology for a long time.
Funny you say that. I was in finance for a long time, which, you know, at least it gave me the business acumen to do what I do now. But yeah, interesting.
But as I was working my way into that career field, I started volunteering at a zoo in Minnesota.
Oh, cool.
Doing live animal programs and behind the scenes tours and that kind of stuff. And then when we moved here to Texas, the rules that govern what you can do as a volunteer at a zoo have changed. And I understand why it's a liability issue.
Sure.
But I really wanted to do hands-on with wild animals rather than pointing people to the nearest food stand and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So I contacted the DFW Wildlife Hotline.
Okay.
And they're a tremendous resource if people find an animal that they need help with. That's their go-to is the hotline.
Yeah, that's really good for people to know. There are specific rehabilitators out there for specific animals, and so, you know, a DFW Wildlife or DFW Wildlife Hotline is a good resource. Texas Parks and Wildlife as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and then of course Bat World.
So when I called them to find out about volunteering with them, we were talking and I explained I'd spent 15 years doing hands-on animal programs at a zoo and I was vaccinated for rabies and all those kinds of things. And they said, wait a minute, we don't think you need to be talking to people about put the bunny back on the telephone. We think you would be a better fit as a rehabber.
Awesome.
With your hands-on stuff. And so that's how I got started. Working with native wildlife to care for orphan, ill, and injured.
How many years for rehabilitation part of it?
This is 20 21. I started in 2005, so
Yeah.
16 years. I've had my permit for 14.
Awesome. Yeah, it's about the same time. Wildlife on the Move's been around since 2005 as well. So yeah, a lot of time, a lot of experience, a lot of things you probably have learned along the way.
Oh, yes.
So one of the things with bats, since they are such magnificent mammals, people don't know a lot about them. So tell us a little bit, what is the most important role, or what is the role that bats play in the world? And if we took them out of the chain of life, what impact would that have?
It would have a huge impact.
Yeah.
Depending on who you ask, there are between 5,000 and 6,000 different species of mammals on Earth today, and that's everything from aardvarks to zebras, including people.
A to Z, I like that.
Okay. Of those 5,000 or 6,000 species, over 1,400 species are bats.
Wow.
So they're comprising over 20% of all the mammal species on the planet.
Right.
That means they have a big job to do.
They do, and they're misunderstood, but also not seen that often because we're
They're
usually sleeping and they're
They're
nocturnal.
at night. Yep, they're
So-
nocturnal. So their biggest job is the work that about 70% of those 1,400 odd species do, and that's eating insects.
Right.
That's all they do
Yeah.
is feed on insects, and they feed on insects like flies, gnats, moths, mosquitoes, beetles, insects that damage the crops that we rely on to put
Absolutely.
food on our table.
Right.
And insects that spread disease.
So an unsung hero, really.
Absolutely,
In the
absolutely.
whole scheme of nature.
Absolutely. We would not have over 450 different commercial products that we use every single day if
Yeah.
we didn't have bats.
Absolutely.
Things that are as basic as soap.
Yeah, and people don't realize that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, cool. I know you brought some bats. We'll see how this goes. But if people would come across a bat, let's say they think it's injured, maybe it's distressed, maybe it's been displaced, what do you all recommend they do? I mean, obviously, Contact Bat World would be probably
Contact
number
Bat
one.
World
But
is number
if
one.
they came across it and they wanted to be of help, but we want to caution people about that. What do you recommend?
Very first thing that they need to do is put on a pair of gloves,
Gloves are best. All right.
because we never touch any wild animal barehanded.
Absolutely.
Matters not what it is, because we are a predator
Yeah.
to everything that's out there that's a native wild animal.
Absolutely.
So if we start picking them up barehanded, they're going to be frightened. They're going to, and if they're injured, of course, they're going to respond not only out of fear, but out of pain.
Yes.
So we need to be very careful about that. For a bat, we want a pair of gloves on,
pair
preferably
of gloves,
something
got
like
that.
vinyl or, nitrile latex, something like that.
Okay.
And a piece of material like a fleece
Nice.
or a t-shirt, something like that. Use this material like you're picking up a baked potato out of your oven.
Okay.
Just pick up the animal, wrap the fleece around it. Don't
Okay.
try to mess with the wings or anything. And you need something like a shoebox
Awesome.
that has no holes bigger than about a quarter of an inch.
Okay.
Put the bat and the material in the box, close the lid, put a rubber band around it. The bat is now secure. Nobody touched it
Awesome.
barehanded. It can't get hurt. We can't get hurt. And then you contact Bat World, and we'll get you hooked up with somebody in your area.
Fantastic.
Who can take care of that bat for you.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a good plan. Well, do you think we might try to see how
We'll
they're
see how
doing?
how
If not, we can
things
talk
do
about,
here.
obviously, we've
Yeah.
got some bat houses here, and Kate's going to talk to us about what makes a good bat house and what does not make a good bat house. But let's see if we can get a bat out. This is a very sensitive and delicate animal, and they definitely have their own personalities and ways about them. So coming at them with a hand is kind of scary. So let's see how we do here.
Well, and the lights are a little scary for them too, because
Lights
they
can
are
do it too,
nocturnal.
because since they come out at night, this is like the brightest moon they probably have ever seen.
Yes.
So who do you have with you?
This is Peach. Peach is a Mexican freetail bat.
Awesome, one of our most common
Yep.
bats in the area.
This
of
is the
DFW.
species that lives not only commonly here in DFW, but also this is the bridge bats from Austin.
Awesome, yeah.
The bats that live in Bracken Cave. There are huge colonies of these bats throughout the southern United States primarily. And these bats are critical for our crops.
Absolutely.
Because one of their primary prey sources is the corn earworm moth,
Awesome.
which causes a tremendous amount of crop damage. And if we don't have these freetail bats up in the night sky chasing those moths down, they can decimate an entire corn crop in a night.
Wow. Yeah. And everybody, just so you know, the only flying mammal in the world, this is one that propels itself, not an airline pilot or a flying squirrel or sugar glider or anything like this. This animal actually propels itself with its wings. They've got a skin membrane between their fingers, basically, and that's how they're able to fly. You can't really see that. It's kind of tucked in, which is okay. That's how it's resting right there. But, while we're talking about it and it's doing really well, what challenges do bats face currently, Kate? And I know obviously in the times we were in coming out of the pandemic, I'm sure bats have been pretty vilified, and they really shouldn't be, because it's not all bats. It's just kind of a specific case that happened. But tell us what challenges they face and how we can help.
There are a number of challenges facing bats today. One is a disease called white nose syndrome
Right.
that affects bats. It does not affect people.
Okay.
But when it affects bats, it's a cave-loving fungus that likes cold, damp places.
And where
which
are
is
the bats usually?
in caves where bats like to roost.
Right.
So we have bats that are affected by this fungus, and it's a winter effect on them. They go in for hibernation in late fall. The fungus kind of creeps in and sets up housekeeping on the bat.
Right.
When we get into the coldest point of winter is when the fungus is the most active.
Right.
And it causes the bats to wake up more often than they should during their hibernation cycle. So they burn through their fat reserves too
no,
quickly,
okay.
and they don't make it through the winter.
Wow. So it affects their normal cycles of
Yeah.
hibernation. Okay. So that's one big thing.
That's
Is there
one big thing.
anything else that, is there a human element involved that we're causing harm with bats at all? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
there are a number of things. The probably the most significant one is people who don't think about the whole never barehanded concept.
Right.
Because if you pick up a bat barehanded and that bat is frightened or injured and it responds to you by biting, which
Right.
would be a normal fear
Yeah,
response,
definitely a fear reaction.
because there's a very small percentage of bats that may be infected with rabies. If you are bitten by that bat and then you bring it to a rehabilitator, I don't have a choice.
You
I have to
euthanize
euthanize it and
Oh,
send it for testing,
unfortunate. Right.
because your life is more important
Than the bats.
than the bat's life.
Although bats are really important to our life, because without them, it'd be a whole different world.
Absolutely.
So, I love talking about how people can become a wild child and make a difference in the world. So I know you have some bat houses here. So let's talk about how people can help the bats and keep them populated in our world so that they help us. So you said to me earlier that one is a go and one is a no.
That's
so
right. That's
tell
right.
us, what would work best for
Okay.
people to put up in their
So-
around their home.
This one's a no.
Okay.
The reason this bat house is a no primarily is that there's no way for a bat to get in it.
Oh, interesting. Looks like just a mailbox.
It does.
Without a slot.
There's no way for them to get in because they can't fly into this.
Oh, no. Okay. So they don't
Okay.
go up and under.
No.
Right.
So this bat house, you'll see, has this open section here.
Ah,
This is called a landing platform.
cool.
And the vast majority of failed bat houses that don't end up being occupied
Right.
fail because they don't have a landing platform. There's no way for the bats to get in.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. I don't think anybody would really know that without having that expertise and knowledge.
We don't really think about it.
Yeah.
Putting a bat house in a tree is probably not a great plan because
Right.
bats that live in a tree aren't going to
Aren't they gonna
occupy a
need
bat
that?
house.
Okay. Is it best to put this on the back of a chimney or on a
It
wall
could be
that's high?
on
or-
a high wall,
Okay.
the back of a chimney. We need to not have anything interfering with the bottom of the bat house and the
Okay.
ground so
Great.
that they can drop into flight. And we need to be sure that it's facing kind of south-southwest. They
Oh.
like to be warm. They
Cool.
need several hours of full sun every
Yeah.
day. And there should be a water source somewhere within 500 to 1,000 feet. A bird bath is fine, a swimming pool, an ornamental pond, a natural stream, any kind of water source
Nice.
is useful.
I know you told me one time one of my favorite stories you had is, and I just did it this week, is my umbrella I put out for the spring and summer. And you said some people that leave those out all year, bats will find their ways up into those, and they open them up and they're just surprised that, hey, there's a bat living in there.
Yeah,
So
in the
that happens
wintertime,
some.
evening bats like to roost up in those in the wintertime.
Yeah.
They'll go in there to hibernate, and then when you open up your patio umbrella in the spring, there's a half a dozen little bats up there.
Right.
And if you just leave the umbrella open, the bats will fly off because they're starting to be insects out. They have a reason to be up and moving.
Absolutely.
And then you either leave the umbrella open, or in the wintertime, you take it down and put it in the garage.
Right, and that's what I usually do. That's
Yeah.
why I've never had a bat in there, but that was cool
Yeah.
that you had shared that. Well, speaking of kind of bats and behavior, what's the time that they actually have their babies? Because I know you have a cool video that hopefully we'll show a little segment of when
prime
they're
time.
born. Is it prime time
Yeah.
now? Right around
We're
May
starting
and
to-
June?
We start seeing babies born in mid-May, occasionally a little earlier than that, and we'll see babies being born through the first part of July.
Okay.
So it's a fairly long season, and the babies, depending on the species, can be with mom for as little as about 4 weeks
Okay.
to as much as 14 to 16 weeks.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll show a little bit of this video because it's pretty fascinating. You don't get to see it very often.
Yeah.
A little graphic in some regards, but it's really cool. So we'll hopefully have this run in here in just a minute for you to see that. Well, let's talk a few other things. One thing I always like asking people, what's the craziest experience you've had working with wildlife or bats specifically that might have been wild or just even funny?
Well, certainly the bat giving birth in my hand was
Well,
it's
yeah.
probably a topper there.
That is a topper because how many people have ever seen that? It's pretty minuscule number.
It's a really
you
small
are,
number and
you are in a
very-
rare air there
Yep.
of being able to have
Very
that happen
rare
in your
air.
hand.
And it was really quite a surprise because I knew she was due to deliver.
Sure.
I just didn't know how soon.
Right.
And I picked her up to feed her, and there we were.
There it was, yeah.
So that's probably one of the big ones right
Yeah.
there.
Well, as we go through, hopefully having that video on, just seeing the care and the attention that the mom bat has for this little baby, and I think you said it had two.
She had twins,
She had
yeah,
twins.
she had twins.
So they can have two at a time, and that's a pretty good load for a bat when they're trying to fly around and
It
get
depends
the
on the
food and-
species, though, because
Sure.
our free-tailed bat will only have one.
Right. Okay.
And it's once a year.
Once a year for free
None of
tails.
our bats reproduce more than once a year.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of them will have twins and rarely triplets.
Yeah.
And then there's our little eastern red bat who can have up to 5.
Awesome. Wow.
And
That's
those
a lot.
babies collectively can weigh up to 30% of the mother's weight when they're born.
That's amazing.
And she's going to carry them with her everywhere she goes
Wow.
for about 6 weeks.
That's a long haul. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And here in Texas, we have just insectivorous bats. There are
Correct.
no fruit bats. And
right.
so that's why the one she brought out is pretty small. And a lot of people don't know that they're that small, but they're pretty small. Our fruit bats get pretty big and a lot of times get mistaken for the vampire bat.
Mm-hmm.
But they're flying foxes is one of the fruit bats that I love.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed seeing your bat. So, as a professional woman, Kate, what would you tell girls that are interested in working with wildlife or even being a rehabilitator or anybody for that matter? What are the steps they should take or what advice do you have for them?
Well, the first thing they have to understand, Eric, is that you're not going to get paid for this.
Well, and I was hoping you would go there. It's kind of a passion thing,
It's a
right?
passion. It is a
and
passion
it
and a
is giving
calling.
back to nature and helping out the environment.
Absolutely.
So, okay, I appreciate you saying that.
Because I get that question a lot.
Sure.
What can I do to have your job?
Right.
Well, the first thing you need to do is have another job that will pay for this one
Support
because this doesn't get we don't draw a paycheck to do
Sure.
what we do.
And it does require a lot of donations and help
It
from the
does.
public, which we'll
It
get
does,
to here
absolutely.
in a moment.
Any kind of grounding in science is helpful, but it's not required.
Right. Would you say volunteering like you did at a
Volunteering
zoo?
is
or-
absolutely useful. Taking training courses on
Sure.
what is involved in being a rehabilitator and understanding all the different pieces that have to come together. We have to have the time, the money, and the space
Right.
in order to accept an animal for care. And if we don't have all three of those, we have to turn it away and hopefully find somebody else that's
that
got
would take it, right.
that availability.
And I know that's a key component of what you do is a lot of training
Yes.
for government agencies, police, fire, parks and wildlife folks. So, Bat World and Kate is a good resource for you out there if you're interested in having somebody teach your folks how to do this the best way and have a resource that can help you out. So
I do have to add one point.
go ahead.
though.
Yeah, please.
You have to be 18.
18 or older.
Must
Okay.
be 18 or older in order to work with wildlife. The state will not allow us to have
And
volunteers
that's for
under
the
the
state
age
of
of 18.
Texas. I'm
Yep.
sure it varies depending on state, but for
Most
sure here.
states
Are they
put
same
'em-
way?
are the same way. You
Okay.
have to be at least 18 because of
That's
the
good to know.
liability.
Absolutely. But don't be discouraged, those of you that are
Mm-hmm.
younger, to volunteer. Like we said, there are nature centers, there's bat rehabilitation
There's
places.
still opportunities to volunteer.
Right.
A lot of those volunteer opportunities are also going to require they be over 18.
18, okay.
But you can still learn.
Sure.
You can still take classes and read books. I know.
and get that background knowledge and
Yes.
experience so that you can apply it when
yeah,
you're
the more
of that
the more
age.
you know going in, the more successful you'll be in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great segment here with our Wild Side Chat, and I hate for it to end, but I just wanted to say, Kate, thank you for joining
My
us, and
pleasure.
thank you
Thank
for
you for
letting us
inviting us.
have a glimpse of a Mexican free-tailed bat, because you don't get that chance very often. And so before we let you go, can you tell everybody how they can be a wild child and support things in the world, but most specifically, how can they support Bat World?
They can support Bat World in a number of different ways. One, of course, is through donations, which we always gratefully accept, and we are a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. Learning about the world around us is really important. I think in a lot of cases, we've become really divorced from nature. We're
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
indoors, and we're too busy looking at that electronic screen, and we've lost touch with what's outside in our own backyard.
Sure.
And I think getting outside and exploring nature, learning about nature, is one of the most important things that we can all do to help wildlife. Planting native plants, if you're going to put in a garden or you need to replace some plants in your garden, think about things that grow locally, naturally, and plant those, because that will attract the insects that our bats and insect-eating birds like to eat. If we are planting a lot of exotic plants that didn't start out here, they're not going to draw the same kind of insects that our animals are accustomed to feeding
Sure.
on. Keep your trees well trimmed and pruned and cleaned up, but make sure you leave a little bit of underbrush and deadfall if you have a lot of trees in a stand, so that the
Nice.
animals have a place to live.
Fantastic. Well, we really appreciate all that you do, and thanks for joining us
Thank
again
you.
on our Wild Side Chat here at Let's Go Wild. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks again for joining us today. And from all of us here at Wildlife on the Move, let's go wild again sometime. But in the meantime, we want you to be a wild child and help support our animal ambassadors like Lacey. And one way you can do that is you can get your very own I'm a Wild Child t-shirt. If you go to bonfire.com/store/wild-wear, we'll have information for how you can do that and support our animal care fund. But also, help support my special guest today and make a difference in the world. We'll see you soon.
Be a wild child and support bats in the world by visiting batworld.org. Donate to our animal care fund at mygivingcircle.org/charity/wildlife on the move. Check out our website and book our programming at www.wildlifeonthemove.com. Follow us on Facebook at Live Animal Shows. Follow us on Twitter at MrB_WOTM. Follow us on Instagram at eric.wildlifeonthemove. And check out our YouTube channel and subscribe to this very program at Let's Go Wild. Subscribe to Patreon for monthly animal adventure videos at patreon.com/animaladventures.